All right, how about we start up at 10:15? All right, I have corrected my technical difficulties here. My streamer did not like me very much. So where was I? We were talking about how we could make our Flex landing page show our title in the center of what our main area was. And I was looking at in my code here, what could I do? And I started by pulling the header outside of the section or the div that I wanted it in. And the challenge with doing that was I have to restyle all of the positioning stuff, all the Flexbox stuff around that particular header. So the real easy solution is really to put the header thing inside a container and to make that thing a flex container and to use a column-wise orientation and use that column-wise orientation with the full width. Now, I can shorten a lot of this up for the most part by simply getting rid of the keyword flex if you don't like putting it in there all the time. When we build up our site, we're going to look at one portion at a time. So sticking with this header portion, one of the other things I'm probably going to want to stick in here is some sort of navigation menu. Remember, we have this nav. Now, in that navigation menu, right now it's not going to show up. If we just take a look at it, there's nothing there. There's no content inside it, so we won't see what's going on there. It's definitely going to be a flex item inside our header flex container, but we're probably going to want to do some fancier things with it as we go. So let's start building up kind of the typical menu system that we would work with. And before we start looking too crazy at the way we build that menu system, because really it's just a kind of fancy list, we're going to need to pay attention to some of the things we want to do in CSS so that we can interact with that menu. Now, the items in the menu are typically going to either trigger JavaScript, which we don't have, or they're going to be anchor links that we can style and take us to different parts of our page or to completely different pages. Remember, if you use an anchor link to take you to a new page, a page that isn't called index.html, none of the styles carry over. You'll have to import and build a whole new web page, a whole new head section, a whole new body section, and import your styles again with link tags. So when you use an anchor link to go to another page in your site, you're really building a whole new page from scratch there. That said, it's one of the more common ways to break large amounts of content into smaller pieces. Let's take a look at how exactly we would build a menu here. Now I'm going to leave on the display here the code that we're working on. Inside this navigation menu, we're going to have to build some HTML, some scaffolding for our menu. And when we build that scaffolding for our menu, we're going to put together basically an unordered list. And in that unordered list, I'm going to take this main menu. Just kind of like that. And we're going to create some list items. And I'm going to create some links. Now, I'm just going to block these in as dummies. These links won't go anywhere. They will go to an ID in the page eventually. But let's say gallery. And then here, I'm just going to copy them. Let's make our game devs have a developer blog. Let's have an about page. So now we have a simple menu, and if we look at the output of that, it looks pretty ugly. It's over on the side here. So we're going to have to add some styling, obviously, to make it look nicer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new thing in our styling. And the thing I'm going to introduce, we're going to put at the very top here. A lot of times we want to do things very consistently. And having to remember the color scheme that you're using is a little bit challenging from time to time. So what we have the ability to do in CSS is create what we call CSS variables. And they're really simplistic. You can't do any real crazy work with them, but we'll set them up. We use a special selector called :root, and use this sparingly because it's kind of expensive. And in here, we're going to start with 2 dashes and then the name. And I'm just going to call it light. And I'm going to use light blue. And this is just a synonym. Medium, light gray. I'll just call it gray. And dark. Let's use slate blue. There we go. Okay, now those make definitions for us. They don't actually do anything. If we want to use them, we have to use them with a special function that CSS provides us called var. And it starts with a var, and then in parentheses, we use our light. And that should come out the light blue. Now, here's the nice part. Let's say I create a highlight. So I've got everything in here. Excuse me. If we decide we want to change something, let's put this var highlight. Medium. No spaces there. Now if I use those consistently, and I want to change them all throughout my application, all I have to do is change the color once. And everywhere I use that variable, things will change. Of course, I didn't pick one that I actually used, so that's not very much fun. Let's do this. What was it? Dark. And if I change coral to sure. So I can use those crazy colors. How do I take advantage of that? Well, let's say I want a whole bunch of things to be complementary in terms of color and look. So I don't know about you, but I don't just pick the stuff off the top of my head. I'm not that good at it. But what I do have is access to things like Adobe's Color Wheel. Adobe's Color Wheel is a nice way, if you know a little bit of color theory, about picking colors that are complementary. So in this case, I want just complementary colors. I can see on the color wheel that if I drag one of these around, it gives me a set of complementary colors that kind of look good together. And they work with each other. And depending on the style of complementary colors I want, I can play around with adjusting the wheel here. And you'll notice that it always picks colors that are kind of work with each other. So you can pick these off, and of course these hashtag values, these are the hexadecimal values for the number, for the colors. So if I choose that, copy it, go back to my code, and paste it here, and then I take the next color, it's light green, I'm going to make that my highlight color, there, and then I go back and I pick this pinkish color, and do that, and then we go and pick the dark color, now we go look at our page, and we've kind of changed the whole color scheme up, but all with complementary type colors, and all things that kind of go with each other. So using the combination of variables in our CSS, taking advantage of plugging those variables in lots of different places. In other words, once you define a variable here, don't ever use this color raw somewhere in your CSS. Always use variable light. That way when you change variable light, you change it in one spot and magically it ripples through everything. Okay.
So you can basically like create like color templates from that.
Yes. Yes. And if you were really fancy, what you could do is you could put just the color part in a style sheet. You know, what if I did this? As long as I do them in the right order, and I took this guy, created a new file, and then back here I can take it out. As long as these are defined before you use them, right, they get loaded in this order. Now I can just rearrange these guys any way I like. Right? And when I go to do another page, well, that's okay. I just load these two files again and then create a different style.css for that page. Or I could use the same style.css, create some local overrides. I could create my style section. I can do that. So you just override the things that you need to change on this page so that you get that kind of consistent look and consistent layout styles that you can use and reuse. Right? At the same time, you're not tied into like one monolithic big style.css that's really hard to find stuff in. And you can use the outline here to find things. It gives you all the different styles you have. So it's kind of a neat trick to keeping, yourself organized. All of this is leading to bigger pages, right? When you're doing bigger, more complicated pages, it's very easy to get lost in all the HTML, CSS stuff that's going on. And by trying to keep yourself organized, by that I mean, a comment at the beginning of each section in the HTML part, nice indentation so you can see what you're doing, collapsing things you're not actually working on right now. focusing on just solve one little problem at a time. Drill down, make that problem as simple as possible, solve that one simple problem, and then collapse it up and move on. As you just migrate your way through your application, you can set things up nicely for yourself. I still have a really ugly menu on the side there. And so for that menu, we're going to need to do something. Right? So what I'm going to do with the menu is I'm going to kind of style it up a little bit. Right? And I'm going to use some CSS to try and make the basic elements look half decent. Right? So we're going to start with this idea that we want a little menu on the side here. Now that might not be the place for you that you want to put your menu. You might want to create an aside inside your main section and do it. And for that particular menu, what I'm going to start by doing is making some really simple, straightforward styles to style the navigation area. So we're going to go to our style.css here. And I typically like to put all of my selectors that are based on tags in one area, and then my selectors that are classes in another. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to attach my navigation area with some basic, styles. Now, I want a percentage here because I want it the percentage of whatever container it's in. There we go. And when we do that, the browser is trying to compute how big would it take to fill this content. So that's why you see my stuff shift a bit here. Take the caps lock on. You notice I'm using a lot of the autocomplete stuff here. And here, let's use our highlight color. Whoa. That went crazy. Turn that one on last. Well, don't feel bad if you don't know all of these different styles as you're going. You learn them by using them and looking them up. So, hey, how do I make sure that things don't overflow the page? Well, let's look for the keyword overflow. And from that, you can see there's a bunch of different overflow styles. You can also learn a lot from using the IntelliSense in the editor itself, where you type any style. You just start typing the name of it. It gives you all the possible styles. And when you get to the end of it, you just hit tab to get to the end of it. And then it gives you all the possible values. So the editor really helps us in this case. Now there's some other things in there. Those are all anchors or links. So I want to change a few things around. I have on them, what style did I put on them? I don't have anything on them. So they're just a main menu. Let's add that to the main menu. Let's do then let's use this compound style here. And here we're going to intentionally change it back to a block display. probably should use a variable for this. There we go. I don't like that padding. Take it out. And then let's add a couple things here. Let's introduce a pseudo class. Now, we'll do a quick thing on the pseudo classes and then we'll take a break. This thing that I've put in the CSS here, in watching the tablet, you can see it here as well. This is called a pseudo class. It's :hover. And pseudo classes are states that the browser can put different elements in. In this case, the hover pseudo class is triggered whenever the mouse is over top of something. It's hovering over something. In fact, there's a whole collection of pseudo classes that we can use. And these pseudo classes can be used to do some very fancy tricks or to do some very simple tricks. The only caveat with doing these pseudo classes is the hover pseudo class specifically is very challenging on a mobile device. Put that in the back of your head. It's very difficult to get a person to get their finger to hover over a mobile device and not actually touch it. So for that reason, if you're doing something that's very mobile centric, you kind of want to stay away from the hovers. However, there's lots of cool menu stuff we can do with the hover, so we're going to use them anyways. Can I say? Now, they allow us to apply different changes, different looks, depending on what kind of state something's in. And the typical pseudo classes that we use are usually associated with either hovering over something that we want to think of as a button, or whether some element in a form that we're going to get to next week has been changed or is currently the selection, or whether an anchor, which is specifically what I'm looking at here, has been visited before or not. And we use those pseudo classes by attaching a colon and the name of the pseudo class in the CSS selector. These selectors are only selected when not only is the right class and tag match, but also when the current state matches as well. So it's a little easier with an example, and you can link them together. This first example only happens when the anchor is hovered over. So before somebody clicks on it, we can change what it looks like. If we've been to it before and we hover over it, we can change it. So let's do a couple of these common styles on our menu as well, and we'll see if we can get it to behave kind of nicely. In my anchor, I'm going to add the hover pseudo style, and I'm going to color, and let's choose highlight color. And the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the text decoration. And I'm going to make it let's make it wavy. Sure, why not? And then we're going to change it. Menu. So it has to be part of the main menu, and an anchor, and visited, and hovered over to trigger this rule. I'll just turn it black. So if I save those styles, then I go take a look at my landing page. I can see that as I hover over them, they practically disappear because of that color I chose. Let's make that something really obvious. So now they turn red. Let's make our main menu a little bolder. There. So now we can see that those menu items are really kind of popping. And once I visited one of those links, it turns black now because I've been there once. Now I can change the text decoration on them as well, and I can change the list decoration. So let's take our main menu and change the list style. And let's put none because we want a menu, so we'll get rid of the bullets. Let's take our navigation menu and is that going to do nasty things? Yeah. Oh. There we go, all sorts of crazy nasty things going on. So now we have our menu stuck at 10% width, stuck on the right hand side, fixed there. So as we move the page around, change its size, it's not going to move anywhere. And as I hover over each of these things, if they've been visited, they turn black. You go and look at my source here. Let's take this guy out. If you're wondering, that instant comment thing, if you hit the control and the question mark key, it'll comment it out. It's actually the slash above, but now things turn red when we do this. All right. So when we play around with these pseudo styles, we can do more than just talk about links and whether they're visited. We can start to use these pseudo classes when we're talking about things where we have collections of them. In other words, if we have a class that's attached to 10 items inside a Flexbox, we can choose that the last item or the first item or the nth item can have some different styling on them, which if you've ever seen, let's see my little demo here. If you've ever seen this effect before, is all they're doing. No JavaScript in this. It's simply detecting a hover, and when the hover nth of type. So it's using those pseudo classes to give each one of them a different rotation and a different scale, and then it's putting a drop shadow underneath them, and when you hover over them, it uses the hover type to remove the transformation, the rotation, scale, and just scale it up a little bit. So all of those things are done with these pseudo classes. There's two other pseudo classes that we do see. And again, all of these pseudo classes are really rare, and they're not things that you need to make any of our work happen. They're things that you should know about when you see them in other people's code. You should know that they exist and that there are elements that may take advantage of using them. The last two pseudo classes I want to introduce are before and after. And what the before and after pseudo classes do is they apply styles before something's drawn or after something's drawn. And it's kind of a weird way to think about it, because you don't kind of think of your web page being drawn and it taking some time. It's kind of instant. But the reality is it's not instant. It takes a little bit of time to do. So in some cases, we want to style things a little bit different before they get drawn, and change them up as they get drawn. Again, this applies more to things that we want to make dynamic or interactive. It's a good time here for us to take a little break. I'm going to take a good 15-minute break. What's it, 10:45? Let's come back at 11. There is a video called Golden Ratio in Design. It's a little 7 to 8 minute video. It's a YouTube video. I recommend you watch it in between a break here, and I'll give my voice a rest for a few minutes. When we come back, we're going to look a little bit again at some of the background behind the semantic HTML. That's the special HTML tags. All right. All right. Let's continue to look at some of the pieces that are going to help you make your multi-panel page. So the objective I have here is that the next assignment I have you do is the precursor to the final one, which means we want you to build a basic layout just with some boxes and maybe some placeholder art. I don't need any names or titles in there other than just, this is the title, this is the header. We're looking for structure at this point and use of those flex boxes. The thing we're going to take a look at next is we're going to look at our semantic HTML again. And the semantic HTML, if we recall, is the HTML that just replaces the keywords div with some more intelligent words. And the ones we looked at last time really helped us kind of solidify the structure of our document. And the idea is that while they don't say anything about what something looks like, the HTML tags you choose should say something about what your page looks like from a structural point of view, right? And it makes it a little bit easier to read as a human. So we end up with something a little bit more normal that we can wrap our heads around. And this is a lot like the structure we kind of have. We have a header section and a footer section, and I've fixed them to the top and bottom of the page. I've got a navigation area or a menu area, and I'm going to style that up. Additionally, I'm probably going to make it a horizontal menu bar at some point, and make that menu bar have nice hovers and anchors, and the anchors take me to other parts of the page, kind of above the fold, below the fold kind of thing. I'm also using Flexboxes in all of my layout here, so that if I take the browser and I squish it up or I stretch it out, I'm going to get a reactive design. That is, if I have a container that has 6 other small containers in it, they'll flow nicely and they're not going to overlap in a horrible way. And we looked at this last time by adding some simple HTML tags that are synonyms for divs, but give us some semantic meaning behind what exactly they're going to be used for. A lot of the times we use the content tags to help give us an idea of what kind of stuff goes where. When we're looking at headers and footers, the tag doesn't tell us that it's at the top of the page. The tag just tells us, hey, this is stuff you should think of as the beginning of a page. And the same with footer. It's not telling us that it has to go at the bottom, but it does tell us that this is something that closes off this page. It also gives us the ability to go into CSS and style based on the tag itself, which kind of avoids a lot of really ugly lists of classes in your HTML. And you'll notice that in our HTML, we're already getting this kind of ugly mixed bag of classes where I probably would go through at this point and rearrange a lot of the classes specifically to try and shorten the names up so they read a little bit better. Let's take a look at a couple other elements that you can add. HTML introduced a progress bar. A progress bar is literally a progress tag. It has a value and a max, so that would indicate 70% there. Now, once you set it, it's set. It doesn't get changed, but in theory, this could be used in the future because as we add things like JavaScript, JavaScript can change those values dynamically. So we could put up a progress bar, let the progress bar load, and when the progress bar hits 100%, we would then remove the HTML progress element and replace it with the actual content. One of the ones you might play around with and use is a details summary tag. Now, a details summary tag is kind of a fancy collapsible tag. They're like little collapsible sections you can use. And I would experiment with them and play with them and see how they operate. The structure here shows it is pretty simple. I don't need any extra classes or styling. I have a details tag. I have the summary inside it. That's what I see. and then there's a little arrow that will point down. And if I click on the arrow, the div opens up below it. So we can play around with how do we get collapsible stuff in front of our users. There's a simple dialog tag, and it doesn't really do anything fancy. It just tells you that this is going to be a dialog box. We can try this out and see how it works and behaves. And it's really kind of one of those bizarre and interesting new tags. And there's new tags starting to show up that have some purpose to them. So I'm going to flip back to the editor here, and we're going to try and fix up our navigation menu. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to try and add a detail summary section into one of our areas, maybe in one of our menus. So in our main menu area, we're going to look at our menu, which is really ugly right now. I'm going to get rid of the whole fixed thing because I don't like it. And now I just have the menu on the side here. What I'm going to do is set the width to 100% again. And pardon me. We're going to get that block inline thing going here. Now, what we also want is the container for that menu to have Flex container. There we go. So in our editor here, I'm going to add some of my Flex containers, and this is also a Flex item. So that full width is really, I'm going to have to shift it down too. So we're going to have to take our main area, shift it temporarily, and then this guy. Let's do this. There's not wrap it there. No doubt, just start deleting them. That guy. Title area. There we go. Oh, lost our title there. And let's go look at our inspector here. Let's see what happened. It seems to have fallen off the bottom. Or the side. Let's see where it went. Did it change in color? Where is it? It's way off the side. Yeah. All right. So we're going to have to fix up a couple of things I started with. Space around. Take the fixed part off here for now. Stop forcing things full out. I'm just removing some of the hard-coded spaces just so that we can see what's going on. What's the other one that's got that full? My menu. Take those out so we can see them. There we go. Now we have our little menus and stuff. Let's go into another section here and make details. Summary tag. Now this can be used for menu items, but we look at this HTML and then slide over here. All the craziness that I just undid and did. What I was really doing here was removing a whole bunch of hard-coded widths. I have each of these elements originally set to be the full width. That was creating all sorts of fun issues. So what we're going to do here is just leave them as is, and then we've got this detail summary content here, which is this opening drop down. And if you just click on it, you'll see it opens and closes. Keeps track of its own state. And if you want it to start open, it starts open. Now we can also try a dialog. And you can see the dialog box popping up here. The challenge with the dialog box is there's no easy way to make it close again. So if I look at the actual layout here, I've got no real, idea of what I'm doing when it comes to where the dialog box is. Even though it's in my code here, I have this dialog box. Inside this dialog box, I have some content. And I can't see it at all. I can add an attribute to it to open it up. And then you'll see the dialog box pops up here. Now it's particularly ugly, but again, it's got no styling on it. And it pops up in the middle there. Which leads us to, okay, so how do people get all these interactive elements in the sites? You got menus, you got pop-ups, you got tabs. A lot of it is, quite honestly, just CSS styling on the things we have. Some of the elements we have involve either doing some fancy tricks with CSS or adding JavaScript to react to things that the player or the user does. So in here, what we might do is create a button. Here I'm going to create a button. And in that button, I'm going to just put OK. Now, I haven't done any styling on those things, so they don't look much like buttons. But, if I want to do the full 3D styling thing, I go back to my style.css. I would say, hey, I'm using the button tag. I've got dialog, and maybe for my dialog, I might use background dark, and I might decide, actually, let's do light. Let's do something even better than that. Let's just do the light gray and border radius. Give it some rounded corners. And then on the button itself, again, we're styling a tag here, so all buttons will end up looking like this. You can add some styles here. If you're wondering how I'm doing some of the typing here, pretty quickly, and we'll take a look at that in a sec here. Now here's my new dialog box. There's a combination of things that are going on. One, the editor here has what we call IntelliSense in it, which is the thing that's when I start typing something, it suggests the following component or the following bit. The second part it has here is when I have a brand new tag or something, I have a plugin plugged into my editor that, how do I put it, uses all of the internet source in GitHub to make suggestions using some artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's a really sophisticated kind of tool, but it makes some intelligent guesses at what styles I want here. So by continuing to play with the styles, I can start to build up these components. Now, when we're building our site, what I recommend is start building things and make everything visible, kind of what I've done here, and worry about hiding and showing things as the very last thing you do. When we build the site, we're going to build it into multiple areas, and particularly the thing I'm looking for is when you look at the actual site, if I take my browser window and I make it smaller, I want to see things react. So as I get to a certain size, I want to shrink them down. Now, there's another way to do this that's a little bit more accurate. If we go back to my inspector, that's just right-clicking on the background of your browser and clicking on Inspect. You get this screen. And once you're in this screen, if you look in the top left corner, right beside the little button which says Select an Element, which is kind of an interesting tool in itself. You can click this guy and go click something. So as I've got that tool running, I can go click on anything on my screen and it shows me what it is, which is great for finding, I've got blank spaces. What div is that? What section is that? What element? If I go back to that inspector, again, more tools for you. That's this guy right here. That's select an element. This tool right here gives you what a mobile device looks like. Now I clicked it, and now I get the responsive page. I can choose some of the preset devices. Let's say, what does it look like on my new iPhone SE? Or what does it look like on my iPhone 12 Pro? The other thing it tells you is the statistics. You can also flip it to portrait mode, or rather landscape mode, and then back to portrait mode. And it gives you a scaling. It also tells you the actual device resolution. And I know you look at this and you go in an iPhone 12, 390 by 844. That's not the resolution of my iPhone. My iPhone has a much higher resolution than 390 by 844. So what's going on there? Well, the mobile devices have retina displays on them. The retina display really means that the pixels are so close together that your eye can't tell the difference. They all blend together. And what this means is when you put on a screen, like you can see here, I don't have a responsive layout. I have a relative layout or a reactive layout, which means the boxes change. I go to portrait mode. I lose some stuff on the bottom. I can scroll. I see the little dot, which is my finger. Go back here. Let's go look at our iPhone. What you'll see is everything is super tiny. And it's because it's trying to use the full resolution. When we're working on mobile devices, we will have to set up our browser differently to be truly responsive. And it's a little bit more in depth than we can get into here. But suffice it to say that your devices have a multiplier on them, and this resolution that you see when you try it out in this emulator will give you the supposed device resolution that it thinks it's drawing at. And there's often a multiplier on that. So an iPhone typically has a 3 times multiplier, and that's so that fonts look right on your phone. When you look at it on your phone, the fonts don't look super tiny. It's because it's not at a 1 times multiplication. It's a multiple, but only for fonts. So when we're building our web pages, and we're looking for our responsive look, we're going to run into, hey, the font is too small. Now, there are ways to fix this, but they involve setting up an entirely responsive site, which is a whole other branch of CSS we get into next term. If you want to look at what it looks like in general, you can play around with the different devices that are predefined here and get a rough idea of what a screen looks like in these different resolutions. To turn it off, we go back to the inspector and we click this button. And we go back to our regular website. Now, what we're looking for in the next assignment is this block level layout for your game landing page. So the next thing I want you to do, spend some time while we're here. Instead of me giving you more stuff to dwell on, focus on go find a bunch of your favorite game landing pages. These are the websites that advertise and sell you games. And these game websites, and I'm not talking about Steam here, these game websites typically promote a game. Let's see if I can give you an example of one. So, local game company, they've got a game here. They've got this really in-your-face kind of cool image, and then they've got their titles here. They're using that rule of thirds. If you haven't watched that video, I would suggest highly that you do it. It's a really, really good explanation. And then we've got a fold, obviously, this line right here. And as we scroll down, we've got some art and some content on our particular game. And then we've got a slider. Now, again, what I would recommend doing, because we haven't done the JavaScript behind this, is to implement the slider as a panel, set of panels, images if you want. And then we've got some extra features. How do I get connected?
Sorry, Scott, we can't see what you're looking at.
Oh, my goodness. I'll go back up to the top and do it again. So this is a good example of a typical landing page, a game promotion. So I was saying before, this is a local company, Blackbird, and they have put together this page to help sell their game. They have links to Steam where you can download and play it, links to YouTube where you can get the trailer. They have the typical social media links, which are just the icons linked to the social media sites. They've got their own kind of feature set. Instead of doing the slider part, just do a bunch of panels. They've got some more info about their game, some of the key features, right? And then at the very bottom, they've got this kind of footer part. Hey, who are we? Check out some more stuff. Again, the social media. And then the legal information, support information. So it all fits on one page. And there's really not a lot of heavy images other than the stuff out of the gameplay that they pulled. So the next assignment is for you to put together the framework for this kind of a landing page. So just with boxes, nice color schemes. We don't know what the game is yet. I can tell you that The three I'm going to give you a choice from are all third-person isometric type games. That is, they're kind of the Diablo style games. But I will grab some screenshots for you to use, and you're welcome to pick and embellish wherever you want. These games are in production, so they could change. All right. Okay. Any questions on that? Cool. Next week, we're going to dive into forms and input, the boring side of the web, but the place where you get information back from users, the place where you can ask questions and get information and collect that information out. Right? The last thing we're going to do at the end of the term, very last class, we're going to dive into a little bit of the responsive stuff, but mostly we're going to dive into cool things like sprites, CSS animation, and we're going to play around with some fancy responsive kind of things, elements and components.